Hello, everyone! Welcome back to the Fetchquest podcast, where we talk about video games and more. Today, I am your host, Guy, joined by my fellow co-host, Connor
Hello.
and Brewer.
Hey, what's up, guys?
So, how you guys been this week?
Pretty good, man. I'm stepping back into Elden Ring. I'm prepping for the DLC, man. I'm doing pretty good, pretty good.
How about you, Brewer? You been a little quiet.
Suffering.
Why do you feel so bad, dude? Are you okay? Like, dude, I'm getting my butt kicked in Elden Ring, but I'm not like fucking suffering. What's going on?
It's because of this one menace that almost ruined my life. This heartless little soul reaper who tortured me for eternity and drove me mad.
Man, what in the world did you fight, Brewer?
A frog.
Wait, you were getting. Hold up, you're suffering because you got curb stomped by a frog?
Yes, in Everhood.
Damn, you suck.
Hey, you try and beat it then.
Alright, bet. I'm down, gimme. But, wait, why do I hear boss music?
Damn,
Oh.
Kermit got them hands.
You do got them hands, and now we're going to be talking about our topic for today, boss fights. What makes them good? What makes them bad? What really drives the gameplay of one to make them so memorable? We're going to be covering all that tonight.
Holy fuck, you were not kidding!
Yeah, that frog, he's hard. He took me like a couple hours to beat.
Jesus Christ.
Remember hearing about it in the Discord.
I temporarily changed my name for a time to getting ass kicked by frog because he was that difficult.
I mean, that's what your name. That's basically what your name is right now.
Yes. Well, no. My name is I kicked the frog's ass.
That's awesome. Well, now since we're on that topic, why don't we talk about let's start off with that fight. We're gonna be covering video game boss fights today, and one of them is, as Brewer was mentioning, a frog from the game Everhood. So Brewer, give us some deets, man.
Well, I was gonna say before we do that, I think we should maybe lay out what we all, in our opinions, think an actual good or bad boss fight is, so that way we have sort of a ground on which to talk, I guess.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, it's all
No,
a
that's fair, that's
foundation.
fair. Yeah, that's fair. I guess, like in my opinion, a good boss fight is a fight that is equal amounts challenging and equal parts engaging. Like, okay, it doesn't have to be entirely challenging, but I need to be consistently engaged in the fight. Not just that, but it feels fair and it's not really like too gimmicky. Like, because there are bosses with pretty good gimmicks that force you to be on your feet, but also keep you engaged. But there are also fights that we will talk about later on that are extremely bad in terms of their gimmicks, and they ruin like an experience for not only that boss fight, but maybe even a game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think for boss fight for me, it needs to have like a couple things. One, like with Everhood, is good music because that game has a banger soundtrack. Two, the boss needs to reflect what I've like already been doing, like maybe be a step up from what the game has taught me, but it's gonna up the ante and force me to use the mechanics I've already been using, but in a new way. Maybe it needs a lot of build up and suspense for the fight, but like its story to make me really want to go kick that character's ass. You know, elements like that in a just engaging gameplay in general. Because with any boss fight I have, I don't want it to just be a cutscene simulator. I want to actually be fighting the damn thing.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I definitely see what you mean. And I guess for me, um, I do agree with most of your things. And for me, what a good boss fight to me is it's both equally part. It's challenging, at least for where you are at in the game. Obviously, some rules apply. Like, I'm not expecting a tutorial boss to be super hard, but if I think they should be relatively challenging for where you're at in the game. It should be very engaging because if it's a boring boss fight, I'm not going to want to beat it. And something that is very specific to me is that I really like boss fights where either you get more information about their character from stuff they say or from how they fight. And I think a good transition from that is the Akumura fight from Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal, which um it really, what you get from his character is the only good part about that fight, because the Akumura boss fight is terrible.
Well, I think like we mentioned before, like what Guy was saying with gimmicks, that one has the gimmick of like a time limit, which isn't in any other fight in the game. Which for some bosses in like I think like action games is fine enough because you're actively throwing yourself at it. But for a turn-based game where you're wanting to slow down and think of your decisions beforehand, it can kind of ruin the experience for players when they're having to rush to make decisions, and because they rush said decisions, they're not making the most they're not making the best choices.
Yeah, and another reason why the Akumura boss fight is bad, and this, it does fit into his character, but Akumura's whole thing is that he doesn't actually fight you himself. He will constantly send out he sends out a wave of 4 minions every time, and you have to beat them, which, it speaks to his character because he's like, oh, I'll take you on, but he never actually does. But the reason why the boss fight sucks is because you have to beat all 4 of them at once. So it, and I know Guy especially wants to talk about that, so I'll sort of switch to let him cover it because I know he has harsh words for it.
It's a bad fucking boss. I'm gonna keep it brief because this is from coming from my favorite game. I think it's the only bad boss fight in that game. They try to like Hunter said, it's engaging because you get to learn more and more about the boss itself, like throughout the fight. Not only that, but for like the dungeon prior to it. But the idea that like, oh yeah, if we just buff the defense of one of these enemies without playtesting it led to such a horrific boss fight. Not just that, but it's the only boss fight that has a time limit. So like instead of strategically trying to like plan out each move, you have to go quick and fast. Like it's not that good because the game is all about strategy and making sure you make the right move. Literally in the fucking song, like the main song Last Surprise, there's lyrics in there that are like, do I make the right move here, and then I don't know, it's just so fucking bad.
Yeah,
They did not
I,
playtest that
yeah.
fight very well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
as
like
you
the
were,
one major complaint I ever heard people had from Royal was like the Okumura boss fight.
yeah.
Because like the
There-
original one, it wasn't like exactly the best boss fight at all, but no one was like wanting to like burn the game down nearly as much when Royal came out.
well, I
Or
think the
the
reason
original.
I think there's two main reasons besides the time limit as to why it's so bad. The first one being, as Guy said before, Akuma will randomly just buff the defense of one of them. So unless you are able to get rid of that stat buff, you're not going to be able to fully eliminate one of the fight, but like one of the enemies, and so then you're going to have to. It just keeps going in this loop and wasting your time. And the second reason is because on a blind playthrough, if you don't know the weaknesses of the enemies fully, then you're just gonna die the first time through because you're not gonna know what they're weak to, and so you're just gonna forever be testing it. And when you have a time limit, that's bad. But we've been talking about Akuma for enough time, I think. So let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. I don't want to be let this be like a doom and gloom episode, considering that like boss fights in my opinion are some of the highest of like most of video games. It's like the culmination of a level or the culmination of all of your skill pinned up against this enemy that is objectively better, or it should be objectively better than most of your enemies that you face up at this point. So it can be really engaging and really fun, and I think boss fights genuinely have some of the most potential out of any medium in terms of like having the people being engaged, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I
But
think
one thing
one I want to
you first.
mention from a game
Yeah.
I've been playing a lot recently is well, I won't mention his name since it's a spoiler at that point, but at the beginning of this game, it's the stranger from God of War 2018. First boss in the
Yes.
game, and it's a fantastic opening. Like, oh my god.
For context, the stranger literally comes up. You're about 45 minutes to an hour into God of War 2018. You're done with the tutorial, and up to this point, you should know, like, Kratos is this video game character who's badass. He's climbed titans, felled gods, etc. So for this one guy to come to his doorstep and start punching the shit out of him, and they start throwing hands, it creates such a good opening for the game as to like what to expect, because they don't just throw hands, they fucking destroy entire landscapes, they create cliffs, they, oh my god.
Yeah, because that's like
To
a lot of
understand,
those things I mentioned. Like, it has a good build up. This weird man comes and knocks on your door. You can feel some weird tension. There's like some music playing to kind of put you at disease. You think it's gonna be fine because Kratos catches one of his punches and is like, "Bitch." But then he's like, "Oh, here's the real one." Fucking slugs you, throws you in the air. You get fucking slammed into a tree, and you're like, "Oh, this is serious." So then you start fucking duking it out with the guy, and it isn't just a cutscene too at the beginning. Like, it has that cutscene at the start to like get you engaged, but then you have to actually fight the motherfucker yourself. And this is the like beginning hours of the game, so you're like, damn, what do I do? So you start like parrying him, blocking all of his attacks, just trying to slice him up with the axe as best you can. It's like, it is
yeah,
so fucking. It's such a great way to introduce you to the game and what it has to offer. Because a
exactly,
great way to
yeah,
hook you into any video game, put some of the best you have to offer, and then keep leaving breadcrumbs throughout the way. Like, a lot of Metroidvanias do that, like Castlevania Symphony of the Night. It puts you powered up at the beginning, takes those powers away, but it intentionally does that so you can know how good it'll feel once you build up to that state. Similar for God of War, it gives you that taste of what the boss battles can be like, so that later down the line, once you see a boss incoming, you will be hyped for it.
exactly, man. And the same thing happened with God of War Ragnarok, is that people were exploding about the game when it first came out, is that, oh my god, this is the best intro to any video game. And I mean, hell, the God of War series does an incredible job of setting up this boss, like Brewer said, to give you an idea of what the game's going to be like, and also to test you on like what you've learned so far in the tutorial and the combat, or at least the basic skills of the combat. So for the game to just outright give you this cinematic feeling of gods versus gods, it just creates such an engaging boss battle that not only can be somewhat challenging if you haven't gotten a grasp of the game yet, but also just so engaging because you think to yourself, holy fuck, this is just the beginning. What are they going to be cooking later on?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking exactly. Because again, I'm still playing through it right now. That was like just the opening, and it's only gone up from there.
Oh, dude, the boss fight I think is the best fight in the game.
Yeah, it's
The
like
final boss is
I'm
so
just
fucking
waiting. I'm
good.
just waiting till the final boss. Because like, again, that was the beginning. What's the final boss gonna be like?
Dude, it's so good. But moving away from God of War a little bit, I want to talk about probably the series that is most known for its boss fights, the Soul series.
Oh yeah.
Where suffering was born.
Yes. Ah, yes. So one thing I do want to talk about with good boss design is the Soul series and its failures and its successes. Usually, people associate the games for having great fucking great fucking boss fights all the time that are hard and challenging, which, to be fair, they should be credited for. They have great engaging boss fights that have incredible lore and they keep you on your feet. But they always don't have the best ones. So, for
Yeah.
example, in Elden Ring, Radagon is, in my opinion, the best fight in the game. He's the second Elden Lord who you hear about throughout the entirety of the game, one of the most powerful warriors in the lands between, and he possesses the Elden Ring itself. So this guy is built up to be extremely powerful, and he is. He is one of the hardest fights in the game. You have to be very precise with your movements, with your attacks, because one mistake can end your run. But for every Radagon, there is an Elden Beast. Because right after you fight Radagon, you have to fight the Elden Beast, which is a lot of people's least favorite boss fight in that game. It's a fight that it goes from a hand-to-hand combat boss fight into a giant beast is going to run away and spam spells at you the entire time.
Hmm. Yeah, I think
Yeah, so
I think it's that bit of engagement I was talking about. Like Rotogun sounds like a lot of fun. Someone who I'm having to stay on my feet for the entire time. He's challenging in brand new ways, unlike the other bosses. Whereas that other one you mentioned, yeah, he's just running away, and I can't even really engage with him. I can kind of just move around, avoid some of his lame attacks, which is something I
oh
just
yeah.
really hate to see. Like Monster Hunter, I know and like tried a lot of the bosses that people really didn't like, and once they were converted into the newer games, didn't like were a lot of the water monsters because you'd fight them on land, it'd be pretty engaging, but then they'd go in the water, they'd swim around, shoot stuff at you while you can't really do much but dodge. Which that isn't always inherently a problem because if it has a lot of build up to attack and it isn't used a lot like Valstrax, where motherfucker circles in the air and then dive bombs into you with like a big nuke, that's really engaging. But little dudes swimming around in the water and spitting things at me, not engaging because I hardly feel threatened by it either.
I want to ask a question. This has me thinking.
Hmm.
Um, what? Okay, if you guys can think of like a really good boss fight just off the top of your head, what does it use more? Does it use projectiles more, or does it use melee attacks more?
Probably melee. Probably melee.
Connor,
I don't know. Could you like reiterate the question?
if you could think of like the first thing that comes to your head when you think of good boss fight, does that boss use melee attacks more or projectiles more?
Uh, I'd say melee.
Yeah, I feel like that's a common thing. So that makes sense though. I mean, like you were saying, Brewer, it's like they just spit shit at you. That I mean, that makes sense. It's not engaging because you don't like being camped out. Because like I feel like a boss fight, like gameplay wise, is more engaging when you're scrapping because you feel more compelled to like dodge their attacks and counterattack effectively because it makes you feel like you're making progress through the dodges. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think like it kind of depends on the game too, because like if the whole game's focused around like you swinging your sword, swinging your axe or something, or punching, yeah, it's gonna feel annoying when you have to fight a ranged enemy. But if you have a gun, on the other hand, and you can shoot back, then that's probably you're probably not gonna hate it nearly as much because you don't have that question of like, oh, when can I actually attack this guy? It's more so, how do I avoid his attacks while attacking back at the same time?
Yeah. And that sort of reminds me of this one fight in Sonic Frontiers called it's called the Wyvern. Um, it's the second boss you fight, and it has a very similar thing where all it does is spam projectiles and run away from you. So you have to constantly be chasing this giant thing that's constantly shooting like missiles and lasers at you. And if you get hit once, you get like sort of staggered. And so it's this constant like game of just catch up, of like just trying to catch up to it. And it's so annoying and it's so just like not a fun time to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. From what I've heard, aren't most of Sonic Frontiers bosses like cinematic?
Yeah, they're mostly very like cinematic, like and the reason is that you're constantly and this is for every single boss fight, you have to be supersonic. Um and so you're constantly like basically all you're doing is just charging at them and then when you get close you just mash buttons. But with the Wyvern, instead of it like trying to like attack you or like push you away, it's just constantly running away from you and shooting lasers at you, and it's so annoying.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
that
that
that does sound
kind
pretty
of
annoying.
sounds kind of sucky. Like I said before, I think the battle needs to feel really engaging for it to be fun. I think another thing to bring up too is like maybe scale for a boss fight for also like how threatening it can feel. Like I think the best example of this is Shadow of the Colossus with all the Colossuses you have to fight, or Colossi, because they're
Yes.
these huge beasts that are towering above you, and you got to figure out how to kill that fucking thing somehow with your tiny boy arms and tiny boy legs and a horse. We all love horse.
True. I think I think Shadow of the Colossus. I do not think it has a single bad boss fight. Like, sure, there's like a one or two that's kind of like,
It's
okay,
kind of
it's all right, but like besides that, like it's so fucking good, like consistently good too.
Yeah, the only boss fight things I'd never like with boss fights is like occasionally, because it was originally a PS2 game and its remake didn't patch out some of those PS2 type of bugs and whatnot, is they can be a little janky sometimes with some of the gimmicks. But other than that, like I can't think of a single fight that I don't like, and I can remember almost all of them being so much fun. Like it has a great opening boss, which is a pretty simple design with just a sword and whatnot, but like you stab its leg to make it kneel so you can climb higher on it, and then eventually go to stab the thing in its fucking head. But then you have other ones that like they're climbing on the walls, shooting electricity at you, which you have to hide in the building to not get hit by it. But you shoot it down, and you jump down and stab that thing a bunch. It's just
Oh,
so
dude,
good.
dude, it's so good. Oh my god, I think this is something I kind of want to transition to if we're okay with it. I think that Shadow of the Colossus is a game that has a perfect balance of cinematics and gameplay.
Yeah, I think with its scale too, like this is one thing I think a lot of boss fights can like run to the problem too. They make the bosses big to make them intimidating, but they don't make anything else about them intimidating, if that makes sense. Like I don't feel like their attacks are actually threatening. I don't feel like I have to actually figure out a way to fight this thing. I feel like I press one button and cinematics happen. Like I think a really bad example of
Uh,
this, which I hate to say because it's a great game, is from Tales of Arise, because it has a bunch of like optional or just a lot of just like required bosses that are like these big gigantic spirits, which like they look great. It's like, oh my god, how am I gonna fight this thing? You get into the fight, it throws away a bunch of just stronger versions of enemies that have a bunch of extra health, and during that you fight those enemies, and it just throws some attacks from the background. Once you kill all those enemies, boom, you press a button, cutscene plays, and you just beat the big boy with a single strike. Man, amazing boss fight. I can't get any more of that.
that's something I feel like a lot of AAA developers like have fallen into. Like, I, God, shout outs to this at the Game Awards, but I remember people were complaining about Spider-Man 2 being more cinematics than gameplay because of that one clip.
Oh yeah, that one got a lot of controversy.
Which, I mean, look, I haven't played Spider-Man 2, but I played Spider-Man 1 and Miles Morales. They had like an equal amount of like cinematics and gameplay, so I do think they do a pretty good job at it, but I do agree that like, I mean, like you said, that Tales of Rising example is just really fucking bad, like Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean it
But
sucks because like the lords you fight in the game are really engaging. Like they have all these various attacks they throw at you. You have to like figure out like how can I do enough damage to them in this one phase before they charge up the fuck you blast. And
yeah.
it has, and the characters too. The build up to the villains is really great because they are some absolute dickheads. But then you have like these fucking random giants that like they just don't do shit to you, which is why like I think Shadow of Colossus is like such a damn masterpiece in the way it handles its giant bosses. Because I'm actually engaging with them. When I'm climbing up them, I have to think about my stamina meter so I don't run out. So I got to think of places where I can stand to regain that. I got to think of like all the things they're trying to do to me, like the ways they're gonna roll around to try to get me off. Like it doesn't feel like other bosses and games where like I climb up them, they just don't do anything for some reason. No, I climb up the damn Colossus and Shadow of the Colossus. That thing is gonna do everything in its power to try to throw me off.
You know it. And it's, oh God, I think I think this is something that should be praised for Shadow of the Colossus and like just good design in general. But like the bosses, aka the Colossi, they feel alive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they feel like living, breathing animals in a part of the world. They don't just feel like this objective to go and fight, which on paper they are, but there's just a lot more to them. Like some of them will be
Yeah.
scared of fire, so you can use that to your advantage. A lot of them will like be crawling up with their appendages. Some of them will be running around trying to knock things down to hurt you. Or a lot of the ones are simply just existing. You wake them up and they're trying to defend themselves.
Oh yeah. Which I think is sick because like there's so many games. I mean, like we said with the cinematic problem, it's like it doesn't feel alive. It feels artificial because you don't engage with it. Which I gotta give credit to Shadow of the Colossus. Like they do a lot to make you feel engaged because the bosses feel alive. They are real creatures that are affecting not only you but the world around you. So to have them feel like real animals and real creatures just adds so much to the game, in my opinion, especially with the ending of the game, which we'll probably do an episode of that game soon enough, but no spoilers here. It's incredible. That's an incredible game that everyone should
Please go
play.
play Peak because you can get it for pretty damn cheap too, the PS4 edition, and play it on PS5. It is
Yeah,
worth every single penny you put into it and worth all the time you do as well.
it
Amazing
is.
game.
That's a top like 15 video game for me. It's so good.
If you got a
But
PlayStation and you don't touch that game, you're doing something wrong because that's a must play in my opinion.
same here, dude. But getting back to like the cinematics part with boss fights. One thing that I feel like is really funny, like I know I keep standing for this game, but Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh my god.
Oh no. Are you going to mention the one boss you can tell to, off themselves?
No, but now that you mention it, I might as well.
Dang it, I bring the curse into the world.
Do be careful about spoilers, because I
I
haven't.
will, I will. I will, don't worry. One thing about what I was mentioning earlier about making the world feel a lot like the world or like the boss fight feel alive and engaging. One of the things that I think Baldur's Gate 3 with my current playthrough is doing an incredible job with is making the encounters with every NPC or boss feel like they're a part of the world and that I can like go about it in so many different ways depending on my choices. It makes it feel real, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
so like one example is that I encountered a boss fight in Act 2 where they wanted me to give them their gold, and I was going they gave me an option to make a persuasion check, which if I passed the check with a dice roll, then I would be able to persuade them not to give them my money. Well, I passed the check, and they said, okay, you don't have to give me your money. They gave me another check for persuasion, saying that gold is useless nowadays. I was interested to see what it would do. I passed that persuasion check, and because I persuaded them into thinking that gold was useless, they kill themselves.
Talk about sticking to a character. I love gold. Gold is useless. Damn, that sucks. I'm gonna go commit toaster bath.
Yeah,
That's
like literally. But the thing is about that game is that there's so many ways that you can engage with its NPCs and bosses. The fact that I can make bosses do that adds so much to like my enjoyment of each boss fight because I know that I can approach them in so many different ways. Like let's say I have my main character talking to one boss like in conversation, I can switch to another character, have them hide right behind the boss and just fucking pickpocket their weapon. So they can't fight in battle. They have to use the bare fist.
That's really funny. That kind of reminds me of Tears of the Kingdom fighting enemies, and like, I just steal their weapon away from them and infuse it to something else, and make it impossible for them to use it.
That's really funny. But oh god, Tears of the Kingdom is a good example of like boss fights. But that's just one thing I think a lot of bosses, like a lot of designers, need to like use more when in terms of like giving freedom to the players is that they need to make boss fights not only like engaging but also they need to like let players deal with them in however way they want to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's more satisfaction when you give the players like choice on how to defeat them. Like obviously like I'm not opposed to a boss like, oh, it's weak to ice damage, use your ice weapons. Like I'm not opposed to that. I'm just saying that like there are many ways to get around feeling stale or like, oh, I have no choice in the matter. You know what I mean? Like I have to do this or this. And I feel like a game like games like Baldur's Gate 3 like should like insinuate that more. But do you guys like have examples of like really good boss fights for engagement?
For
I have one.
engagement. Yeah, yeah. What's up, Connor?
I have a really good one that constantly keeps me engaged, no matter how many times I play it.
I have an idea of what this is.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think I have the same idea too.
what's the idea?
I don't know, Connor. You tell us.
Okay, so have you guys ever heard of Spamton G Spamton?
Oh
Man,
wow,
the thing
I've
that's your
never heard of this character
avatar,
before.
the thing that
I've
you
never
asked me
heard
to
of him.
draw for you. Really? I've never heard of him,
I
Connor. Even though
know.
you like probably have a body pillow of him and locked
I
his soul
wish
essence in your basement.
I wish I would have gotten that Spamton body pillow every day of my life.
Oh yeah, I forgot that was actually in charity rewards.
Wait,
Damn you,
what?
Toby Fox. Yeah,
There's,
Toby
there's
Fox had a
fun.
charity for a while.
Can I?
If you donated to it, you got put into a raffle for a bunch of different items.
And one of
One
them
of
was a
them,
Spamton body pillow.
yes,
Oh my god.
it was just Spamton themed items. Like you could even bid on like the Spamton Mona Lisa,
Yes. It
and
was
it got
called
like I
Spamton
think,
Sweepstakes.
and it got thousands of dollars in donations.
Yeah, it was really cool, and it was a super cool event. But I unfortunately was not old enough at the time because you had to be 18 in order to actually like enter.
If it makes you feel better, I donated myself and I didn't win jack shit. So
I don't think I think it was like a sweepstakes thing where it was like a raffle.
yeah, yeah, there's a bunch of different prizes. But let's
Yeah.
move on. Tell us about Spamton.
So this is I would say this is kind of like brief spoilers for Deltarune Chapter 2, but I mean he's one of the most popular characters, I think, and at least in that area.
I mean, Deltarune chapters 1 and 2 are like free, so I mean, just go play it.
Yeah, just
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
go play Deltarune. But the reason why Spamton is such a engaging boss to me is by the way, you fight him twice, so I'm just gonna start calling him Spamton Neo since that's like the one I'm talking about. But the reason why I think Spamton Neo is such an engaging boss fight is for three reasons. One, because Spamton, just as a character, is so chaotic and attention grabbing. Like, all the stuff he says is just constantly, like, grabbing your attention because of A, what it implies, and B, because it's probably just going to be funny. The second reason is because of all the attacks. Every attack is very unique, and actually very difficult if you don't know what you're doing, which when you play it the first time, you're not. And like he'll have this attack where he sends in these like he'll like shoot these things at you, and if you don't destroy them, then they'll explode and deal a lot of damage. And so you have to constantly like be looking out for that. And then the third reason is because of the music, because Big Shot is an absolute banger of a sound of a music track, and every time I listen to Big Shot, I get really hyped because I think it's a really good track, and it reminds me of Spamton G. Spamton, the best character in all of fiction.
I think it is really telling how like Spamton is a pretty engaging boss fight because there's like a good amount of Deltarune Part 2 or Chapter 2 dedicated to like developing him as a character and giving you background. So I think like the build up to his boss fight, which is like the secret boss fight in Deltarune Chapter 2, I think it's really sick to see us like fight him and like with the context that we have of Spamton, um, prior to that, it makes it even better considering that like we know the context of like what he's doing and why. So
Yeah.
I do have to give like the developers props on that part.
So, I could honestly probably for 2 hours talk about the entire like Spamton's
Oh,
lore and
we know,
how it
we know,
relates
Connor.
to Chris, the main character. But the main reason I really like Spamton's fight is due to, as I said before, what it tells you about not only Spamton's character, but also Chris's character. Because Spamton and Chris, the main character, are mirrors of sword. They are the two sides of the same coin. But I'm not going to get into that because if I get into it, we're going to be here for like 2 hours. So
Yeah, we can't do that.
I think we
Yes. So
should
I think I'm gonna pivot then
let's pivot to
into a
music.
very engaging boss through gameplay. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword Koloktos. This is one of the
I
fan
love that fight.
favorite Zelda bosses because of like what exactly doing the boss. Because you have this big menacing figure. So there's one of the checks. Great music too. Another check. He brings out all these swords to attack you with. He strikes them into the ground. You take the whip that you were using in the dungeon. So there we go. There's another mechanic. There's one of my checks. You rip it off, and they're like, okay, what do I do from here? You see that there's an option to pick up the sword that's like 3 times your size and just beat the ever living hell out of him with it, which is so fun. Like, please play Skyward Sword because he does these big sweeping attacks on you, but then you get a chance to rip his arms off and then just fucking go to hell on him with gigantic swords. So you get that dopamine rush.
That is such a good one, dude.
Koloktos is a really good fight because it makes you feel like such a badass. Like you feel like such a powerful, like just one man army, and
Yep.
which is how Link should feel.
Yeah, plus you're the one doing it the entire time. Like, there
Yeah, it's
isn't no
not like a
cutscene or anything.
Yeah,
It isn't
exactly.
just like some outside force. No, you're grabbing up the big ass sword and you're kicking the thing's ass with it. Which makes me want to do a second pivot to unfortunately a bad Zelda boss. Because like we were mentioning before, you want it to be a lot of gameplay over cutscenes or a nice balance. This one felt a little too cinematic. I think we can all agree. And it's gonna be like Dark Beast Ganon and Breath of the Wild.
Such everything about Breath of the Wild is insanely good, except for that fight. That fight is super just not good.
Yeah, because what the fight does is it puts you on a horse, you get a bow, you run around while it doesn't really do anything, kind of just stands there. Maybe occasionally will shoot something at you. It's never a threat, though, even for how big it is. You shoot a couple of marked spots on it, and then you shoot a gigantic eyeball that comes out of it. Man, very, very engaging. I felt like I was definitely doing something there, running around, watching him stand idly by and not attack me.
Yeah, the biggest you know what the biggest threat for Dark Beast Ganon is? It's like accidentally maybe running into one of his legs. Like that is the biggest threat that the boss is. Cuz all it does is that it just stands there, maybe moves and then shoots an super easy to dodge, super easy to see coming laser that takes forever to like actually
And that only
shoot.
really, like, it's at the front of him, which you're attacking by the side, so, like, there's almost, like, zero risk of him ever hitting you. Like, the first time I fought him, I no-hit him because he's, like, piss easy.
No, it is really easy. I don't think I've ever been hit by a single move from him. That's a really bad example of like keeping the player engaged. Like I will say for story significance, it is like pretty raw, but I don't know. It's so dumb that
like,
it's so easy.
it's like the only one major point I can give it off, like, my general list is, like, the music was pretty good. Other than that, though, like, it takes away all the elements that you love about Breath of the Wild and its combat, and it just strips it down to run around on a horse and maybe shoot it.
Oh, for sure. I don't want to keep the doom and gloom of like Dark Beast Ganon, but I am curious. What is everyone's favorite boss fight? Like, it doesn't have to be for story reasons. It's just like the one that you felt the most engaged, that had the best combat. You felt what's everyone's favorite? I'll let everyone go first on this.
Just like any game.
Yeah, any game.
That's a really hard one.
I'm curious.
I'm just gonna mention a memorable one then, if that's all right, because off the top of my head, that's hard. This one is SMT4, the Minotaur. So it has all the elements I mentioned before. So the first thing I'm gonna mention, SMT4 soundtrack is a fucking banger. You all need to listen to it if you haven't. Guy, I remember I showed you its boss theme one time before, and you were like, "This is hype," because it is.
It is.
because it is such a great track. Like it uses a bunch of different instruments and whatnot while being really high paced and having a great build up. The boss itself has like a really weird design, and when you're playing it on like the 3DS as intended, the boss is like it's just a PNG if I'm gonna be real, like a GIF. But the way they animate it, it pans up to like its strange face, which like makes it really intimidating, especially with the music playing in the background. Before you fight
Yeah.
it, you're going into this weird empty chamber thinking like what's in here, and then the thing speaks and you're like shit. And then too, for like game mechanics as well, as like one of the first bosses you fight, it's a really damn hard fight. Like people, there are so many clips on YouTube of like memes and whatnot of people getting bodied by the Minotaur, because that thing can like kill you in like a single turn if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is such a memorable fight. Like SMT4 has like great fights in general and music, but that's the one that like really got people hooked into the game. So I'm forever gonna love it for that.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. What about you, Connor?
Okay, so I have two off the top of my head. One is not going to be a surprise, but if I had to go off the top of my head, Spamton Neo.
Really?
Okay.
I would
Yeah, I
never
know,
guess that.
shocker, I know. And to avoid spoilers, the final palace fight in Persona 5. Not
Persona
Royal,
5 or Persona 5 Royal?
not Royal, Persona 5.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
I really like Persona 5 Royal's final palace fight, but if we're going like purely off of like
Gameplay.
what sticks with me the most, it's Persona 5, the final Persona 5 version fight.
No,
Well,
that's fair.
don't explain the boss too much, but explain some of the mechanics that make it a lot of fun, just at a base
Um
level.
okay, so this is going to be confusing, but the reason why I really like it is because it's so hard to explain without spoiling it. But the final bit where you fight the boss by yourself without any of your teammates is in really good. It's super challenging, and it's such a great way for the character for like not only the characters but also like for the ending of the fight to go. Um, it's it has a pretty difficult first phase. Its second phase is super engaging, and then that final third phase is just the icing on top to make it probably one of my favorite fights that I've ever had to do.
That and the music in the background
The
is a banger.
music is just
It is really
all
good.
Persona 5 music is a banger though. So
But that
True.
track in specific, though, that's one of
Oh,
the
yeah.
most memorable ones.
yeah.
No, that's a good pick though.
Now I have to specify that I do also really like the Royal Final Palace fight, and I have to constantly keep saying that because Guy really likes it a
I
whole
will
lot.
massacre you.
Yeah,
That's my
I'll
number
tell you love
2.
it.
That's my number 2, dude. It's my
I-
number 2.
And I'm trying to not make sure I don't wake up with Guy stabbing me.
Connor's gonna wake up. He's gonna be crucified.
Yeah, he's gonna be. It's over for you, for Connor.
He's gonna see a health bar pop up and then music playing in the background. It's like,
That's
God,
me.
the simper of
It's-
Persona 5,
Oh my god.
the Eldritch Beast of Horror,
Jesus.
the oh hairy one.
I think it's time for my favorite boss fight.
Get into it.
I think my favorite fight in video games, on like boss fight, is Slave Knight Gale. For context, he is the final DLC fight in Dark Souls 3, where you fight him at the end of time, and he's the culmination of all of humanity's suffering and strife. For context, he is a character to which he doesn't get introduced until the first DLC of Dark Souls 3, but you take 2 DLCs of development for him and build up for him to be this final boss. Not only is he one of the hardest fights in the game with so many moves to mix you up, but he essentially he's a perfect fight in that he insinuates like what Dark Souls 3 is supposed to be. It's like it's a game that's pretty aggressive, but you're supposed to like play patiently and make sure that, you're aware of your situation. Because Slave Knight Gale is the one fight in the game where I felt like I had to play perfectly, but it was fair. And the main thing with it is that anytime Slave Knight Gale swings his sword, his cape will mimic the exact same motion as his sword and act like a second hitbox. So his sword will swing, and then half a second later, his cape will swing, doing another hitbox. So you have to roll like once perfectly. You know what I mean? So that you can dodge both.
That's nice. That's nice.
Yeah, it's such a cool boss fight because, like, you'd think it'd be really unfair, which, to be honest, it's very, very hard. It's one of the hardest fights in the game, but it's fair in the fact that it's so well telegraphed. Not only that, but it's the combination of, like, your build. It's supposed to be the last fight you fight in the entire game, and for it to go all ham out with not only the music but the gameplay, the settings, the lore, the arena itself is awesome, which I won't go into detail for, but if you know, for those who know about Dark Souls lore, you will understand why it's so awesome. But the fact of the matter is that it's two of the best swordsmen in the land going at it to see who like is the willing to be not willing, but like who is deserving of the Dark Soul itself is so interesting to me from a lore perspective and a gameplay perspective. Because you two you scrap until one of you falls, and it's awesome.
That's amazing, man.
It's such a good fight. For those who don't have Dark Souls 3, at least listen to his music track because I think his boss track is the best one in the game, especially with his face transition. Oh my god.
Nice.
But yeah, with that being said, that's my favorite boss fight. But the reason why I wanted to ask that is because I wanted to get like an idea of like our favorite boss fights because everyone can have like a favorite game and typically that can be pretty varied. But like I think the thing that a lot of people differ with is like favorite boss fights because I feel like it's how people approach the game and how they like their levels of enjoyment affect how they see bosses. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, a good and bad boss can really shape how people perceive a game because, like, you can have amazing levels and just like a really engaging story, but if you have a bad boss fight, people will hate the game. But on the other hand, you could have those other things I mentioned as bad elements, but if you have like a banger boss battle, people won't stop talking about that. It's the one thing people always look for, the boss battles.
Well, yeah, it's because like, well, the boss battles are such a culmination of like everything, and they're so climatic that that's going to be like the main thing. I heard this. This is an interesting point that my English teacher in 10th grade actually told us, which reigns true for boss fights as well. Is that usually a conclusion to any paper will stick the most out of anyone's memory, and it can be a decent paper, but if it's a great conclusion, people will think it'll be a good paper. And I feel like the same thing happens with boss fights, is that you can have like a mid-level, but an incredible boss fight, and so people will think of that more fondly because that's the end of the level. You know what I mean?
I think a similar effect for like movies too, or just shows. Your show can or movie can be great throughout like the entire series or whatnot or duration, but if you have like a
Yeah.
really shit ending, people are usually not gonna like it even with all those great elements. Like you can have great
Yeah.
memories, but oh man, that ending was ass.
Ending was ass, yeah. It honestly depends, and I feel like that's why bosses like have such a big impact on gaming. Is like it's an ending to a chapter of like this point in the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you know,
It's like
always end off on a high note.
exactly. So like that's something that I feel like a lot of game developers like do try to do is that they try to make it climatic and try to make it like really memorable, but in doing so, they kind of like they don't make it as engaging, which frankly they should. Like that example you brought earlier, Brewer, with the Tales of Arise boss fight, that just seems like shit.
Dude, I hate that because like I love that game. Like it's not perfect, but like it does honestly have some really good boss fights. Like the main thing in the game is like you're a slave and there's these lords that reign above you and like keep you trapped. So you're going to fight them and like they're real shitheads, and once you do fight them, they're strong, but you can do everything in your power to fight them, and it'll feel fair, honest for the most part, and be a culmination of like a lot of stuff in the game. But then
Yeah.
you get to those couple of other bosses, and it's just like, I'm not even fighting them. They're throwing out random attacks. I'm fighting these enemies, and then maybe I go stab a weak point. I'm not fighting them. This is a cutscene.
No, that's entirely fair. Which, look, to be fair, there is some stuff that excuse me. There is some stuff that video games just can't do to try to make things like cinematic, but also let you play at the same time. But when your entire boss fight is just nothing but cutscenes, like, come on, dude. You know?
Yeah, well, you can have like cutscenes, but still have like really engaging gameplay, like Metal Gear Rising. For how insane the
Yes.
cutscenes are, the gameplay is like just as engaging. Like in the cutscenes, you'll be parrying a big ass sword or like cutting through buildings. And some of the boss fights, they'll throw those things at you. You got to cut them up, and then you got to like also parry them. So there's not that weird
True.
discrepancy where it's like, oh man, the cutscenes look fire, but the gameplay is mid. It's like, no, it's hype the whole way through. I'm fighting a Brazilian samurai who's throwing supercharged and supersonic slashes at me.
And that's what's raw.
It's raw. Brazilians.
Raw Brazilians.
Maybe we
But
shouldn't
yeah,
word it like that, but
raw Brazilians.
Oh,
Oh man.
good.
But yeah, no, I think that's actually a great point to like get some concluding points in. I feel like I'll start, but I feel like boss fights, like I've said, they provide such an enjoyable experience for people, and they're climatic, they're a culmination of everything you've learned to the game up to that point, and they challenge you on what the game has taught you. And I feel like a lot of developers, I mean, honestly, it depends on developers. Frankly, like you have games like God of War with Santa Monica Studios, trying to make it cinematic and gameplay heavy, which works to its benefit. You have game developers like FromSoft who barely put any cinematics in the fucking gameplay, and it's they don't put that many cinematics into the boss fight itself, only like an introductory cutscene, and like everything else is pure gameplay, which I do appreciate them for because the cinematics are the gameplay. But I feel like as long as it's engaging with enough gameplay to make players want to come back and make it fun, like make you feel fond of that boss fight, I feel like you've done a pretty good job. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What about
And I
y'all?
think to continue off of that, like boss fights are always going to be some of the most memorable moments in a game. Because, like we mentioned before, a bad boss battle can ruin it to the point where, like, you don't even want to play the game anymore because you don't want to be stuck on this one stupid boss for, like, the rest of the time. But the boss battles that, like, really nail all the aspects I mentioned with, like, good background and build up, good story, music, and an engaging fight really will make a game that much more memorable.
Oh, for sure.
All right.
Conroy.
Yeah, I fully agree with all that. I think what I have always been a more character based person when it comes to video games and stuff, which is why whenever I do a boss fight, unless it's some like random boss you just stumble upon, that's why I like to get glimpses of their character through their fights. But I do agree that a boss fight should be challenging, it should be engaging, it should be an actual feel like an actual boss when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
character is very important because that can show the boss's character can be reflected in the boss battle itself. Like this one's known for like just being absolutely batshit crazy, so maybe they like snort cocaine during the fight and then throw dildos at you or something. I don't know.
that's a
That's
very
an interesting boss fight you got there, Brewer.
that's a very interesting boss fight. I can't
All
wait.
right, guys, and my new game, Brewers World,
And
that's gonna be the
Brewer.
first boss fight.
But like
In Brewer World.
Brewer
yeah,
World.
yeah, I
Wait for the
can't.
sequel that will scare Guy at Brewers World 2.
Yeah, it'll
No!
the whole thing. Every single word will have two in it.
Man,
God.
man, guys, this has really been Brewers World 2. 2.
I feel a beat coming on. Hit it.
2.
But
Oh
yeah,
man.
but like I guess that's kind of why I like Deltarune and like stuff like that so much. because Deltarune is its whole basis, and the reason why it's so successful is just because of its characters. Well, not just because, but that's like a very big reason
Well, that's
why.
what like got people pulled into Undertale because
Yeah,
people
exactly.
just
The
absolutely loved the
characters.
characters, and that was very much reflected in the boss fight.
Yeah, like Undertale and Deltarune are both like, in my opinion, like masterpieces, especially like Undertale. Um, but that's why I'm such like a that's why I like to see character reflected in boss fights, because it's just such a cool thing to see. Because imagine if you have a character that is like super timid and but is still forced to fight you, but their entire boss fight they're just constantly like using these huge attacks and constantly swinging at you instead of like, as much as I don't like when characters run away and spam projectiles, if that is reflective of the character, then I will give it points for that. As I said, that's the one thing good with the Kumura's fight. Even though the rest of it's ass, at least it reflects his character.
Yeah, yeah.
But I
Yeah,
think I think that's enough rambling from me on that. Are we good to wrap up?
I think we
I
are.
think we're good.
All right,
Yeah.
everyone. So if you enjoyed this vid, make sure to like that video. Smash it with maybe a boss attack.
Comment down below what your favorite boss fights are, and tell us like what are some of the worst boss fights you've ever encountered. Personally, I think my least favorite is Bed of Chaos.
Yes.
What
But with
about
that being said,
what about
guys,
Gank Squad?
oh god, Gang Squad's up there. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Again, like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content and you want more of it. With that being said, we've been Fetchquest, and this has been our episode on boss fights in video games. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Bye bye.